3 o'clock. My daughter wrote that in. It's her fault. We'll blame it on her, okay?
Don't worry about it. As long as we got a chance to talk to you, which is a very big honor for both of us. We've been so excited about this interview all week.
No. It's a big honor for me. You have to get this thing right now. As long as we're all gossiping heifers together, let's go for it.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our special guest today, you've seen her all over the internet. She is one that's going to teach us about diversity, racial pressure in America, and how some people are just too blind to realize there's a privilege that holds them back from having knowledge about racism. Miss Jane Elliott. You did your own class?
Yeah, I did my own class. I've been following Miss Jane for a long time.
I'm telling you, we are so honored. Like I said, we've watched all your videos. Your classes are very interesting, very interactive, and I see you're probably the only class that people get so caught up in their feelings so quickly that they want to leave.
Oh yeah. Yes. It's interesting that if you treat pale-faced males for an hour and a half or 15 minutes, the way we treat people of color in this country, they go crazy. I've been hit by a white male during this exercise. I've had a knife pulled on me. I've been run out of town. I've had people take me out of town at midnight because teachers that I put through the exercise called the superintendent and said, if you don't get that bitch out of town, we're going to shoot her. So, we pale faces cannot take for a few minutes what people of color, particularly blacks, are expected to take for a lifetime.
Yeah, and so for some reason, a lot of Caucasian people that are not aware of this, about how much that black people go through on a regular basis, and put our shoes on for a hot minute. I can't take it for 5 minutes. Yeah.
But you see, the ugly thing about it is they don't have to take it for 5 minutes. They're not required to take it for even 1 minute. And they are forgiven for doing it to people of color on a daily basis. And if you haven't read this book, you need to get it and read it. Because if you don't read anything but page 123, you have to read at least page 123 of this book. It is absolutely terrifying because of what happens to children of color in the schools in this country today. You have to, if you know the history of this nonsense, you will not put up with it. Even pale faces won't put up with it if they realize what the history of this nonsense is.
Now, speaking of history, I'm interested on what got you started in these type of studies.
I was a middle child of a casual Catholic mother and a believing Baptist father. And being the middle child is difficult, to say the least. But being in a situation where your two parents are very different in their religious outlook. My father practiced his religion. He really did. He was the most moral man I've ever known. He would say, you don't judge a book by its cover. And he'd say, if you think you're smarter than he is, prove it. So you had to get busy and prove it. He would not tolerate. I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise in 1968 in my classroom. And the following year, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation came and filmed it while I did it with my next group of third graders. They sent me a copy of that film. I took it up to the hotel where my parents lived, showed it to my father and my mother, and after it was over, my 59-year-old father stood up, took his red handkerchief out of the back pocket of his bib overalls, wiped his eyes, blew his nose, and said, I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old. And from that minute, I knew that you can change, you have to have a reason to change, and you have to have proof that the change is absolutely necessary. My father, from that time on, would not laugh at a racist joke. He might laugh at a sexist joke because actually we women can sometimes be very funny, but it's kind of universal. But he would not laugh at a racist joke or an anti-Semitic joke, because he remembered how those little blue-eyed, brown-eyed kids acted, those little pale-faced white kids acted when they were treated for a day the way we treat black children for a lifetime. He was furious, and he never forgot it. And so from that day on, the first time we did the exercise was the year before that. And I knew I was right. But from that day on, when people say, that's too harsh, how could you do that to those little children? I say, wait a minute. If you think that's too harsh to do that exercise, one person in a contained classroom, the only one who's doing it, and nobody else is involved in it at all, and it's going to end when the school day ends, you think that's tough? Try living with it from birth to death. Tell me how tough that is. If it's tough to do this to little white children for 2 days, how tough is it to expect people of other color groups, particularly blacks, to live with it for a lifetime? And the whole society is doing it, and it's doing it from the minute you wake up in the morning till the minute you go to bed at night. And if you watch television, it's doing it all night. If you go to the movies, there it is. If you turn on the radio, there it is. If you look at the map, there it is. It's constant. It is horrid. It's unfair. It's not good history, and it certainly isn't good Christianity.
And that's what's so funny about me, because we have so many people claiming to be Christians, and the behavior they have toward other minority groups, it's not Christian-like behavior.
Oh, heavens no. We couldn't afford to be Christian. That's a lot of work, and you have to give up a lot to practice your Christian belief. We'd have to change our history. We'd have to change everything about this country. If Jesus walked the streets of Osage, Iowa, or St. Ansgar, or Minneapolis, Minnesota, he would be rejected, and he would be run out of town on a rail, because, you can't have those funny-looking people with those long dresses and those sandals run around your community. I mean, that just isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And if that man came back to earth and said, "Judge not that ye be not judged," you'd have to turn down every you'd have to close every Christian church, because we can't afford to do that. We are all about judging people on the basis, unfortunately, of physical characteristics over which they have no control. We don't even know whether you're Christian or not. As long as you don't look the way we think you should, we can treat you unfairly. It is totally ridiculous, and it's insane. Alcoholics say that doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is what we call insanity. And that's what we have been doing in this country for the last 300 years. The same thing over and over and expecting different results. Now we have killed. First, when this fool in the White House says, first comes the looting and then comes the shooting, I've got news for him. When we took this land over, first came the shooting, and then came the looting. He's got it all backward, because he's got everything else backward. The man is a case of arrested development. He's a case of arrested development. He can't help it. That's what he is. But the rest of us have to be responsible for what we do and what we say, and who we abuse and who we refuse to abuse. And we have to start refusing to abuse those others who aren't really others. Let me make something perfectly clear. There's only one race of people on the face of the earth, and that's the human race. It wasn't until the 1700s when Linnaeus came up with separating people according to skin color that we came up with the idea of it's a fool, it's a lie, it needs to be wiped off. It needs to be wiped out of our minds. We have to re-educate the educators, because they've been educated to believe that Linnaeus was right. Linnaeus was wrong. He separated plants on the basis of physical characteristics, and that works all right. It doesn't work with humans. We are not plants, and you cannot separate us and label us on the basis of our physical conditions, physical characteristics, because we are all members of the same race. You two are my 30th to 50th cousins. That's the way it is, because we all have the same ancestors that evolved in sub-Saharan Africa between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago. You are my cousins. If you don't like it, that's too bad for you. You are my cousins.
I love it.
Period. I love the fact that if I trace my DNA back far enough, I'll find DNA from a country in Africa in my DNA. Because we all would. Because that's where we all came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we had parents at Ancestry, and their roots go back to Congo. Some have Viking background, but
that was daddy.
yeah, I mean, so we definitely have relations.
But the Vikings came after Congo because people from Africa left the area of the equator and moved, and as they moved from there, their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter because they were exposed to less and less sunlight. But those brilliant black people managed to populate every landmass on the face of the earth, and that includes the Vikings. The Vikings came; they were black people who faded. They never were white. There is no such thing as a white person on the face of the earth. It's time to get over that. Now, if you go to Tanzania, you'll find a group of people whose bodies don't produce enough melanin so that they are totally white. But you need to Google Tanzania and see what happens to those albinos in Tanzania, and you'll think, oh, well, maybe being so white isn't so great after all. You need to take a look at that.
Okay, definitely will. Let's go back on the history of our country for the last 10 years. We had the election of Barack Obama, and of course there was a rejoicing period, but then there was a lot of racial tension because we had a black man holding this high power position. Currently, we have now the complete opposite of what we had in the office not that long ago. And my personal opinion, which my sister will agree, he wreaks racism. He influences his followers to do racist things, to question black people jogging through the neighborhood, to question Spanish people who are at a convenience store.
To question Obama for his birth certificate his whole 8 years. I mean, that really, it made me and, of course, my parents angry. Because we know where it comes from.
And you should have been angry. You should have been so angry. People should have stopped him then. And they should never, the television network should never have put his face on over and over and over. It didn't cost him practically anything to run that last campaign because television covered him because he was a weirdo. I mean, look at him. This is somebody that just making no sense at all. Let's put the village idiot on television, and that's what he was. And so they did lots and lots of airtime, and didn't realize that there were a whole bunch of people who would agree with everything that fool said. And that's the reason we got stuck with him is because Hillary Clinton won that election by 3 million votes, but the fools in 4 electoral colleges in 4 states in the United States who didn't know what the electoral college was put into the Constitution for voted him in because that's the way the state went. But the electoral college is put in the Constitution to guarantee that no one who is unfit for that job will ever get it. They didn't realize that, and so they put him where he is. And you need to realize that when Barack Obama was in office, for 8 years, the racists had to go underground. They had to keep their mouths shut and go along to get along. But they were plotting what they were going to do when that black man left that White House. I remember Richard Nixon said to a group of white reporters, "I'm trying to save the White House for you white people." And I thought, how dare you, as the President of the United States, how dare you make such an absolutely uncivilized and ignorant kind of statement? But he did, he got away with it. And then here comes Ronald Reagan and says, we're going to build a shining city on it. And I thought, yeah, fool, and we build it out of the bones of blacks and Native Americans. Let's not brag about that shining city on a hill when the people who built the White House were black. The labor was done by black, and many of the people who are working in the White House today doing menial jobs are black. We will use them and abuse them, and that's what we've been doing. Now, I'm sure that a lot of white people, pale faces, are going to turn this off at this point, which is okay. You can't afford to give too much information in a short time to some folks because they've had the wrong lesson for so long that they don't want to hear the truth. We do not want to hear the truth. If we give up the rightness of whiteness, what have you got? What do we have?
Just like everybody else.
That's what you have to wonder. Yeah. What else do we have? We have built our reputations on the fact that we have pale skin, which makes no sense.
And that's true. And the thing about the president's influence of hatred,
Yeah.
Right now, we're going through a very serious case of recognizing, police brutality does exist. But in the black community, it's been existing for many years, even when slaves were set free. Because you will say it very often,
more blacks were killed after slavery.
They were killed after slavery, and that after slavery, that's when we had the police department develop.
The slave catchers.
Yeah. So now we have this police brutality, and people seem to turn a blind eye to it until it affects them.
We've always had police brutality, particularly for people of color in this country. However, there's another form of brutality, and that is repeatedly showing that black man face down on the street with that cop's knee on his neck. That's not the fact that happened is one thing. The fact that we show it over and over and over again, what does that tell little black boys and their mothers? What message are we sending? I think we could show it and then say, if you want to see this again, you'll have to Google it. Or if you want to see this again, you'll have to look somewhere else. We are not going to repeat showing this over and over and over. And I know they'll say, well, people have to see how horrible it is. Black people know how horrible it is.
Yeah, I will watch it.
Hey, I know whole pale faces. I know what so-called white males who will look at that and say, there we go. At least that's one more we don't have to worry about. You know it, and I know it. And showing it over and over tells young white members of the Aryan Nation and of the white supremacy groups and of the KKK that this is what we need to do. And they are given the information that it's all right. We can get away with this.
Yeah.
And if
it's normalizing.
Go to jail, if they don't get found guilty of murder, there's something very wrong with our Justice Department. Which there's something wrong with our Justice Department.
Yeah.
Because the man who's in the White House right now has appointed a whole lot of judges, and you need to realize that it isn't just the judges on the Supreme Court that he has appointed. It's several hundred of others who are going to make judgments about racism in the future in this country. This is a very dangerous time as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I believe so too, because we have like a free-for-all on police brutality, because I was hoping that once the camera was turned on George Floyd's situation, we would try to see a little bit better reform, but it seems like they're acting more crazy than ever.
They're acting out like bad children.
Well, you see, that's the point. You have three ego states: child, parent, and adult. And many of the people in the police department have never gone past their child or parent ego state. They have never, like the president, has never developed an adult ego state. And if you think I'm crazy when I talk about that, then get the book TA for Teens and read it. And 1 page, 2 pages of that tell you these are the things you say when you're in your child ego state. These are the things you say when you're in your parent ego state. These are the statements you make when you're adult ego state. You read those, and then you'll realize, oh my God, what's happening here is the result of people not making progress through those ego states. Most of us are cases of arrested development. We stop at one level and never get into the adult ego state. The purpose of education is to take us through child and parent and into the adult ego state. It's not doing it.
And then that's the sad thing, that we have this to shake off right before another election. And I want to know, is there any type of cure? I doubt it, but I'm going to ask anyway. Is there any type of cure for racism?
Sure, there's education. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from root dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. Now, if we had been leading people out of ignorance in the schools in the United States of America for the last 200 years, we wouldn't have a problem called racism, because we would have been taught there's only one race on the face of the earth. Human beings come in different sizes and shapes and genders and gender orientations, and they take on different religions, and they have different cultures. They come from different nationalities, but they're all members of the same race. We could have been teaching that in the schools in this country for the last 300 years. We could have been using, just for the last I don't know when I got this book, doesn't matter, but this book, the copyright, I don't know, it's 68 about. 1968, yeah, 1968. If you haven't seen it, get this book, and if you have children, read this book to them and with them, because it shows you, it tells you how mankind began and how the different races began and how wonderful they are. You have to see, there are pictures in this book of every different color, every different nationality, every different religion. It is simply a wonderful book about the color of man. And what it says is, color is not a determinant or an indicator of intelligence. It's simply your body's reaction to the natural environment. Get over the idea of several different races. Everybody should see that book.
Yeah. I wish that we had a way of just kind of easing that idea into people's mind on getting educated to become, unplugged from racism. But at the same time, as you said,
don't even think about easing it into their minds. Educating educators is like training mules. You have to get between the ears of the board before they listen to you. Educators have to be told, look, people, you have been miseducating people for 300 years. Now, in order for you to be an educator and hired by the public school system, to work in the public school system with children of all colors, all kinds, but only one race, you're going to have to take a lesson and a whole lot of lessons in the fact that there's only one race. Every so-called educator should be forced to read this book because it tells you the history of this mess and it tells you what to do to get us out of it. And it's called education. It's called leading people out of ignorance. And to believe in more than one race is to be totally ignorant about human beings. There's only one race, and we're all members of it. Period. We've got to start teaching students that there's only one race, and skin color is not a predictor of intelligence or worth as a human being. We've got to get over that. But you see, policemen have been educated the same way the rest of us have. And if you don't, people say, is that all you want us to do is read? I say, yeah, that's what I want you to do is read. Have you seen this book, The Color of Law? If you read this book, you'll realize that our laws were written and are being written by people who believe in the myth of race, of several different races. So, of course, they write laws that segregate communities because they believe that's the way it's supposed to be, because they're convinced there are several different races. It's only when you realize how badly you've been misled that you will say, whoa, wait a minute here. No, we're not going to blame segregation on black people. We're going to blame segregation. That's what we have in this country. Most of it, the vast majority of it, is not de facto segregation, which means people choose to live with people like themselves. It's de jure segregation, which is put in place by our legal system. And those laws need to be changed. When you build a highway, a superhighway, that goes between the black children and their school, that's not an accident. When you close the supermarket in the black section because some of the black people were unhappy during the civil rights movement, and so you moved the supermarket out of the black section, moved across town where they can't possibly drive to get to it. I've seen that happen. I've been there when it happened. And we moved out of town because we knew there was going to be a race riot, and we didn't want to take sides, but we knew which side we would take. The point for you folks is, I'm too old for this. I remember too much. I remember what happened during the Holocaust. I was born in 1933, the same year that Hitler came to power. And the last 3.5 years in this country, I felt like the world felt when Hitler was in power. You need to realize that we are going down the same slope, the slippery slope that we did by allowing Hitler to be the way he did. Now people are going to say, oh, she's really way off base now. Read the book When at Times the Mob is Swayed, and you will realize that what I'm describing is exactly what is happening. This man's pattern for governing came from Adolf Hitler. And I'm not joking about this. And this is serious. We need to realize it.
Yeah. A lot of people have a hard time realizing that, but I look at simple examples like with all the protests that have been taking place. We just started slowly reopening up our country due to COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
But we had certain citizens that were carrying and toting guns in the Capitol building and
coughing and spitting on police.
I'm doing a Zoom right now. You have to call back. Goodbye. They won't call back.
Her and Daddy would get along so good. That dad said, okay, bye.
Okay, but they were allowed to. Yeah, they were allowed to bring guns. They were allowed to bring guns into a state capitol building. But you take it back during the civil rights movement when the Black Panthers were carrying guns, the FBI became alert and made their life live in hell. So that's what I'm seeing, just plain history play out in front of me. Oh, you guys can carry guns. We can't.
But you also had recent where one of the women were escorted by black men with guns. Then they come out and say there'll be no firearms allowed around the building.
Yep.
Right. But you have to realize that people quote the Second Amendment, our right to bear arms, and leave out the part that says, as a member of a government organized militia. It doesn't say you have the right to bear arms all the time, and just because you are alive that you can have a gun. No, it says as a member of an organized government militia. We aren't supposed to have the right to carry guns up and stand on the steps of the State House or the City Hall or wherever it is in combat clothes and carrying combat rifles. No, this is not right. You know it's not right. I know it's not right. And can you imagine if a bunch of black males came to town carrying guns, what would happen?
Oh, God.
I mean, give me a break here. You have the right to carry arms as a black man, as a white man. You have the right to carry arms, even though you're misquoting the Constitution. We misquote the Constitution a lot. That's only one of the times we misquote the Constitution. However, if you are quoting a wonderful statement that says blacks are 3/4 of a person, and that was in the Constitution too, wasn't it? Maybe it's time we need to start looking a little closer at the Constitution. I don't want to throw out the Constitution. I want to throw in education about the Constitution. I want people to know what those men were all about and what they said and why they said it. And if we were following the Constitution today, our president, cheater-in-chief, would have been impeached.
Yes.
He has done things that were unconstitutional over and over and over again.
I don't know what he has over the people in the White House, whether they're scared of him or they're just riding along this train because they have the same attitude of belief.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think most of them don't believe what he's saying, but they want to get along with him. And people like Mitch McConnell know that he has control of the purse strings. He can decide who gets funded by the Republican National Committee. Donald Trump can. So everybody is going to go along to get along in order to keep their job.
Yeah.
And that should indicate to people that you don't want them in that job. I watched the impeachment hearings, and the only Republican that stood up and said, yes, he needs to go, was Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
Is he the only one who had the courage of his convictions to stand up and say what's happening is wrong? Where were the rest of them? And those are all, you want to remember that those were all, for the most part, white men.
Yeah.
You have to realize that people of color were on the side that said, let's get rid of this situation. But we pale faces protect our own. Make no mistake about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has just been so, just talking to Jane and getting all this knowledge. What are the books you would recommend our audience to read? Because I definitely want them to know the titles of the books so they can go out and start reading them immediately and reading to my nephew.
They have to read The Myth of Race by Robert Wald Sussman. Robert Wald, W-A-L-D, Sussman, S-U-S-S-M-A-N. You have to read the book, The Myth of Race. The only mistake that he made is really well researched. The only mistake that I see that he made in that was calling it The Myth of Race. A myth is something that you make up to explain something in nature that you don't understand. Racism isn't a myth. We know what it's about, and we know how it happened. The myth of race should have been called the lie of race. But when we buy it, it was called the lie of race. We'll take it as a myth, but we don't want to take it as a lie, because then we have to admit we have been hoodwinked for 300 years, and it's time to give it up. But that book is absolutely full of good information. I don't have it here with me right now, but there's in the last paragraph, next to the last paragraph of the last page of that book, it says there is only one race on the face of the earth, the human race, and we are all members of it. That's the conclusion he reached after years of studying this situation, and that's the conclusion you'll reach after reading his book. It is just fantastic.
Excellent. Well, Miss Elliott, we appreciate you stopping in with us, Heifers. I'm telling you.
Wait. Here's something that's easier to get and quicker to read. This is the April 2018 copy of National Geographic. Read this book. You can get it from National Geographic. Send for it. Everybody in this country should read this book this week, because in this book, among other things, you will see a map of the world that shows where we started and where we moved from.
Awesome.
And just think of that. Those black people moved from the area of the equator and managed to travel and populate every landmass on the face of the earth without any modern technology. And we call them ignorant, and we call them less than people. You've got to get your heads on straight. And in that issue, you will find these three pages. People talk about whiteness. Look at these. See all those different colored people?
Yeah.
Under each one of them is a number. These are letters on a Pantone color wheel. Everyone has a number. You can find the color wheel, put your hand against it, and find your number on that color wheel. You will notice that there are no very, very white people on this, because skin doesn't come in white. You need to read that National Geographic magazine for that page and this page, and these girls are twins.
And you just looked at that cover, you would not funny.
Here's another thing you have to give up. Somebody's going to say, "Oh, they're biracial." No, they aren't. When somebody walks up to me and says, "I'm biracial," I say, "Oh, really? Which of your parents came from outer?" And then they walk away. They're not listening, because I have offended them. And when some people, if you're biracial, one of your parents came from another planet. Get over it, because there's only one race here. And then when some liberal white woman will say to me, "I don't see color, I'm colorblind," I say, "I knew that before you told me. Because if you weren't colorblind, you wouldn't wear that shirt with those pants." They get offended because I have offended them. But you see, I am offended when they say they don't see color, because they're talking about skin. And they're saying that they don't see the largest organ inch by inch on my body, which is my skin.
Yeah, the skin. My skin color, right.
What they're really saying is, I'm uncomfortable around people who have that unfortunate discoloration. So I'm just going to pretend you don't have it. And I nip it in the bud, because here's the way it is, fool. If I looked like the first settlers on this earth, the first people who evolved on this earth, I would be as dark can be. And I wonder if she would notice it. I know she notices it, because I see the way she treats people who don't look like her, or whose skin is a darker color than hers. White people have to understand that people of color recognize what they're saying, recognize what they're doing, recognize where they're looking, which part of you they look at. And when somebody says to me, "I don't see color," they wish they hadn't.
Yeah. I've heard it all.
Yeah.
I've worked in Mississippi for a long time doing hair. So I have heard and dealt with it all.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And therein lies the rub. You know more about racism than I will ever learn. I know that, and you know that.
Yeah.
So why are you interviewing me?
Because I love you, for one. I love you. I've learned a lot from you. And one thing I definitely have learned was not to argue with someone insane, and that's a racist.
And anybody who says, when somebody says to me, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. I don't see people as black or brown or red or yellow. I just see people as people. I immediately say, wait a minute, you forgot to put the word white in there. Because it's all right to see white, but we don't see black, brown, red, or yellow. They don't see that as a racist statement.
Exactly.
And the teachers, if you ever get back in the classroom, teachers are going to stand up in front of their classrooms and say, I don't see people as black or brown or red or yellow. People are all the same to me. And some smart kid is going to stand up and say, you forgot to put white in there. And furthermore, what color is your car? And if that teacher tells them what color the car is, you know the teacher was lying about not seeing color. I don't see any color. Of course they see color. We're trying to cover up our ignorance. We're trying to cover up the fact that we don't want to relate to people who are of a different color. Well, every one of us is an African American. In this United States of America, every person is an African American. Now, that's not good for black people to hear me say that, because that takes away their differences and some of their weapons. But we've got to convince people who are colorless that they aren't colorless. If they trace their DNA back as far as they could, they'd find DNA from a country in Africa. We are all members of the same race. And you get tired of hearing it, but you know, if you have an item for sale, you have to advertise it 4 times before people will buy it. So I'm going to advertise the idea of one race at every time I open my mouth, and I open my mouth a lot because I'm allowed to, because I'm old and so-called white and and mean and short, so I don't have any power. So I have no power as far as my size is, but I have this color skin that they want to call white. But do you see my shirt? What color is my shirt?
White.
What color is my shirt? White. Does my skin match my shirt?
Nope.
Does my hell no, it doesn't match my shirt. It's speckled, people. My hair is white. My teeth used to be white, but now they're gray. My eyeballs are white, but my skin is not white. It is speckled. Well, you can call me tan. You can call me beige. You can call me brass. You can call me shit, but you cannot call me white because that's not what I am.
Exactly.
Get over this. You and I are cousins. You can call me sister if you want to, but you don't want to be my sister. It's safer to be my cousin.
I'll be your sister.
Yeah, we'll be your sister. I
don't have no problem being your sister.
Well, that's because you aren't where I am. You don't live where I do. People who are my sisters, stay away from me because.
I try to stay away from this one too, but hey, we're sisters.
Okay, all right, we're sisters. Okay, sisters.
But I know what that shortening is. Our mom is short and has a big personality.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I gotta go on.
I don't mess with little people. I know that they got a big bark.
Yeah.
Since we don't have much size, we have to be crafty, and you can't trust us.
That's mama.
Yeah, that's mama.
That's my mama.
And oftentimes we get called bitch. And when they call me bitch, I say thank you, because for me, bitch is an acronym for being in total control, honey.
There you go. Exactly.
Well, you got anything else coming up, Ms. Jane? Are you going to be doing any additional speaking, teaching additional classes online?
I am going to do online classes for anybody who calls and wants them, and I'm going to charge them for the hour or 2 hours. Because I have been, I usually do travel for three days to do a speech someplace at a college or university or a corporation or someplace, and charge a lot of money. But now I'm not going to get into a flying petri dish anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's just, I'll be doing online classes, and I have several coming up, and I'm absolutely delighted to do them.
Okay.
That'd be awesome, because a lot of people who can't attend your classes personally, they actually need that exposure, and online gives you such a wide range audience to get that message across too.
And I know a lot of black people need to take your class.
But unfortunately, it's easier for them to turn me off when I'm online. See, when I'm in a college auditorium, they have to stay because they're getting credit for being there that day. You have to give white folks credit for going through a 2-hour discussion of racism, but you get no credit for going through racism as a person of color for a lifetime.
Yeah. I was gonna say, if they turn you off, they can't get their money back even if they turn you off now after they pay for your class.
I don't know. Well, the students aren't the ones who are paying me. The university is. So if the kid is at class and is at home watching it on his television or whatever, or his computer, he can turn me off, and nobody knows that he turned me off. But that's his or her problem, not mine.
That's their loss, exactly.
Yeah, those who listen are going to learn something, and they aren't going to put up with the racist comments in their presence any more than my dad. My dad wouldn't put up with it after he saw that film. He said, okay, that's it. And because he said that, I ignore people who criticize me for doing the exercise with little white kids, and traumatizing them. I think it's traumatic for black boys. I'm talking about young black people, male people, to see what happens to black males when the cops are unhappy about what they're doing, or just unhappy because they're there.
Yeah. And it's sad because black children have a natural fear complex of police, and they wonder why, because I have to explain, my son is 17 now, and he's been very fortunate not to go through any of that, but when he sees it on television, he's like, why? Why would they do that?
Well, and why would they show it over and over and over unless it's attempted intimidation? It is saying to black children and to their mothers, this is what will happen if you don't do the proper thing. And showing it over and over. And many people will disagree with me on that, and they'll say, well, we have to see how awful it is. Black people don't have to see how awful it is. They know how awful it is. They live with it.
Yeah. I will not watch it. I have yet to watch the video, and I refuse to. I've seen it enough.
Yeah, it's enough. It's and that's another thing I don't agree with. Enough is enough. Enough is too much.
Yeah.
Enough of what we've done is too much, and that means it has to stop.
Yeah. I mean, aside of us just being general people watching that footage, I mean, you would imagine the effect it's going to have on his children.
The young 17-year-old girl, the recorder, has to go through therapy right now. Our nephew has not watched that. He's watched the protest, but we will not let him see the murder. And people tell him, you got to see the video. No, I don't.
No, I think you show it once and then say, if you want to see this, Google it. But we are not going to repeat this over and over and over on the television from 6 o'clock in the morning until midnight. This is ridiculous. And people are, if you want to traumatize someone, just do what we're doing. This is a very Hitlerian kind of thing to do. And the networks will say, we are doing what's right. No, we aren't doing what's right. We're doing what's insensitive. We're doing what makes money. We're doing what gets us a good viewership. But we aren't doing what's right.
Yeah.
Excuse me just a minute.
Sure.
I'm doing a Zoom right now. Call me later, please. Another one who won't call me back. That's okay too.
They gonna call you back.
Exactly. But we don't want to hold you up too much longer, Miss Jane, because we know you are a very busy woman.
Yeah, she's popular.
Don't call me now. I'm busy. Thank you. The next time I'm going to say, no, I won't either. I'll be nice about it.
And there was one thing I would like to see, for which I'm sure it would never happen, is with CPS, when they would start reporting as child abuse, teaching your child to be racist. And why hasn't that happened?
If a child is being taught racism, shouldn't that be considered child abuse and could be reported to CPS? Yeah.
Absolutely. But what you don't realize is that you got to read this book. The laws in this country have been written from the beginning by people who went to college and learned the lie of several different races. And if that's what they learned, then that's what they will legislate. Those are the laws that they will write, and those are the laws that they will pass. You have to realize that this started many years ago, and when you read this book, you'll think, what have we done? What have we done? Because what we do is we assign people positions of power on the basis of how well they have succeeded either in business or in education or whatever. And we forget that they learned the same old things that all of us did when they were K through 12, which is the beauty and the rightness of whiteness, and how unfortunate that we have to put up with these other people. What they forget to tell all of us is only 25% of the population of the world is white. 25% of the population of the world is pale faces. The other 75% is people of different color groups. And the thing that's driving racism today in this country is the fact that we pale faces know that within 30 years, we pale faces in this country will be a numerical minority because we are not reproducing our color as fast as we used to. And as Mr. Don Soros T. Rupp says, we don't want to let those brown-skinned people come in here from the other side of the wall, the southern wall, is because they reproduce too rapidly. And we have to close our Planned Parenthood clinics because in 1987, 60% of the fetuses that were aborted were white. Now it's down to 39% of the fetuses that are aborted are white. You need to realize that closing Planned Parenthood clinics is our attempt to see to it that fewer white babies are born. You have no idea. People don't know fewer are aborted. You have to realize that's what's going on. I'm sorry, I'm busy right now. You have to know that's what's going on and refuse to go along with it. Planned Parenthood clinics do lots and lots of good things for women of all kinds. To close them in order to cut down on the number of white abortions is absolutely insane. Because that is not the only thing that people who go to Planned Parenthood clinics are advised how to do. There are all kinds of women's health issues that are taken care of and are in Planned Parenthood clinics. We need to realize that.
Well, men, they don't like women as well, so they can't understand that.
Why?
I said men don't like women as well, so they're not going to understand that.
Well, I don't know. I think I know some men who really like women, and I know some men who I really like. But
having old men try to tell you, especially with Trump administration, about what to do with your body or, in birth control, I'm like, how can you tell me what to do?
Because you have the power and you got elected with the help of evangelical Christians. And if you want to know about evangelical Christianity, you need to read Frank Schaeffer's books. Frank Schaeffer is the man who brought the evangelical movement to this country from the UK. His father, Franklin Schaeffer, started in the UK. He taught it to his son Frank. His son Frank brought it to this country. And now he says, stay away from the evangelical movement. It has been corrupted. It has been distorted to the point that it is nothing like what his father started, nor what Frank Schaeffer meant to start when he came to this country. You need to read Frank Schaeffer's books.
I do. Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely will.
I think one is either anger with God or patience with God. It is so important that we read that book and realize that what is called evangelical faith in this country is nothing like what Franklin Schaeffer started.
Not surprised.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No. I'm surprised. Okay, go ahead. We done?
Oh yeah, no, we've been on the phone with you for about a good hour. I didn't want to take up too much of your time, but like I said, we've been wanting to talk to you for the longest time. had so many questions and definitely wanted to get your insight on.
Did you have any other questions?
I think I'm good right now.
I've watched your videos for years. I've learned a lot from you. I know how to deal with races because of you.
Well, but I know what I know because of you. You need to know that most of what I've learned from talking to people of different color groups, particularly those that we call black, because you know so much and you are willing to share so much. And I'm so appreciative of that. Because if we all knew what you two black women know, we would have changed the whole situation. We would have changed it 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years ago. We knew better.
Yeah.
Eleanor Roosevelt knew better, and that's the reason she said black men can fly airplanes. She fought hard to get into the military, particularly into the Air Force. If we listen to women like that, and women like you, we could change this thing. We could turn this thing upside down. I have no doubt about that.
We're going to try to keep doing our part, and we're going to continue to follow you, Ms. Jane. Please, whenever you have something you want to say, get off your chest and let the world know, you are always welcome back on our platform.
Always.
Well, that's nice, but believe me, you don't mean that.
Well, I mean, I will tell you, a lot of black people that I do know, some of the things you went through. I had a black man dispute with me about, the first people on earth were black. Mm-hmm. So some black people do need to listen to what you're saying.
Exactly.
Because they can be brainwashed and lost.
That's right, and they believe the same thing that white people believe. Because that's what you had to say in order to graduate from high school, in order to graduate from kindergarten. You had to repeat the garbage. You had to have a teacher hand you a box of Crayola crayons, and this one is white, boys and girls, and all that kid had to do was put that crayon against his skin, any of them, and say, well, evidently teachers lie.
Yeah.
Either that color, that crayon isn't white, or the skin. So educators set themselves up to be mistrusted from the minute they say that. That's ridiculous. From the minute you see them in junior high, which is grossly, I argue about this a lot, which is not the way the map ought to look. Get a picture of the map in your mind that we use in the classrooms all over the United States. You see Greenland hanging down in the middle of that map like a great big ripe plum hanging down in the middle of the map. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the Peters projection map. Now this map is fair to all peoples. You see where Greenland is in this map? Mm-hmm. They're up here. It's a teeny tiny place. You see the size of South America there. According to the Mercator map, the legend on the bottom of the map says South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland. But on the Mercator map, Greenland is shown bigger than South America. According to your social studies teachers, what is the equator?
Supposed to be on the border of the earth. That's what they tell us, at least.
An imaginary line around the outside center of the earth, the outside of the earth. An imaginary line halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole. On the Mercator map, and you go and check this out, the equator is 2/3 of the way down the map. So you can't use the word hemisphere to describe the upper part of that map because hemi is a prefix that means half. Get a copy of this map, and you can get it from ODT.maps. Order a copy of this map. Tell them that you heard me and you want some of these. I won't get any money out of it, but I'll get great satisfaction if I realize that some of you are sending these. Some of you are going to send these to the schools. The Boston Public Schools put the Peters projection map in their schools a year ago because this is a map that is fair to all people. These shapes are distorted, but the sizes and locations are right. It's time to see the world in a new way. And that's up to parents of children today to take this map to the school and say, hang this one on the wall. And I'll come back and be sure it's there. Because if it isn't there, I'll bring you another one. And I'll until you get good. That's what my daughter had to do because she was living in Texas, And she took a map to school, gave it to the teacher. It got torn, so it got lost. So she took one that had been laminated, hard to tear laminated map, so that one stayed on the wall for a while. You have to be very persistent if you're going to change this situation.
I was about to say, when she hit Texas, because we're in Texas too, the education system here, especially when it comes to African American studies, is very disappointing. When you just learn what they're learning in public schools, it's really non-existent.
When I saw the history book and I asked my nephew, do you have this history book? I couldn't believe it because it's a bunch of lies.
Right. But these kids, and it isn't just African American kids that have to learn. Those pale faces have to learn that too, and then they have to go out of the classroom and act as though everything they just heard is gospel. It's not. Yeah. It's what teachers were taught, and that's all they know how to teach. We have to re-educate the educators, and we have to do that right away if we're going to change this situation. We have to refuse to allow people to use audiovisual aids that are absolutely incorrect. We have to do simple things like change the map, for heaven's sake. That's not a big deal. I buy these by several thousand postcard-sized maps, and I take them with me when I do college or university, and I hand them out just before I finish speaking, and they're just tickled to death to get them. They can't wait. Wow, look at there. And they take them home with them, and they're pleased to get them because this is a whole new way to see the world. It's time to change our perception.
Okay. All right, Ms. Jane, we're going to grab a couple of those maps. Thank you so much again for your time. Like I said, if you want to come back on, we do insist you come and talk to us again.
Okay. I'll remember that. And if I call you in the middle of the night, you say, why are you calling me? Because this is when I had this. Here's a thought I had last night. I had my husband and my son. My husband and my son both died and were cremated. And you know something? Those white males' ashes are gray. I know that black males' ashes are gray. And
yes, ma'am.
All are ashes when you're cremated.
Oh, girl.
I'll bet you can't tell which came from whom. I don't know. I'm not a mortician. But I keep thinking, look at there. After death, we're all the same color.
Yeah.
That's true. Cremated. Yeah, but the point is you have to go through a lot of heat to get cremated.
I think we feeling a little miss that heat right before the big snooze, okay?
Oh, Lord.
I think we're going through a lot of heat right now, and we may get out of this seeing everybody, not the same color, but the same race.
Amen.
Maybe we're going to have to burn down the idea of several different races, and then we're all going to realize that we're all the same color and came from the same place, and different faces aren't different races.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, Miss Jane. Well, look, you get those phone calls before your phone start buzzing up again.
Yeah, she's popular, very popular.
I know. Yeah, right. Some of them hate calls, and I don't need them.
I won't be surprised.
All right.
Especially in society today.
That's good. If you put your head above the parapet, somebody's going to try to shoot it off. So I just got a lot. So thank you for calling. And I hope I talk to you again.
We do too. Yeah. Take care, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.